If you're in the market for a new or pre-owned vehicle, try Pop Chevrolet. Pop Chevrolet will get you the best price guaranteed. Visit popchevy.com. That's P-O-P-S Chevy.com. This episode is brought to you by Paintsville Tourism. Paintsville is located in eastern Kentucky in the heart of the US 23 Country Music Highway. Visit paintsvilletourism.com. That's paintsvilletourism.com. Come see why Paintsville is eastern Kentucky's city of note. This episode is brought to you by Wild Bill's Fireworks. At Wild Bill's, they will help you start and maintain a successful fireworks business. Whether you're starting a retail store, a seasonal tent, or a part-time venture, Wild Bill's is your one-stop wholesale fireworks supplier. Their team can help you pick inventory. They offer business training, ongoing support to make sure you stay profitable no matter the size of your business. Call or text for more information. Just ask for Bill at 606-367-5569. That's 606-367-5569. Or visit wildbillsfireworks.com and make sure you ask about their financing plan. Welcome to the Behind the Shed podcast. In this episode, we welcome guest Don Von Tress, the songwriter for Achy Breaky Heart. We hope you enjoy this show. This is Behind the Shed.
We got our good buddy Don Von Tress here today, the writer of the famous song Achy Breaky Heart.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, man. We just met him a few minutes ago. He seems like a good guy, you know?
Yeah, I know.
So anyway, so Don, welcome to Behind the Shed.
Thanks, man. Thanks for inviting me. First, I didn't know if I wanted to come or not, but then you told me that Harold was so excited. And so I thought, that's something I need to see.
Yeah.
We've talked about that on the podcast already.
Yeah, that would be something.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Y'all are both dear friends and old friends, and I appreciate it.
So the first thing Don said to me as we start this thing is, man, really? You know how many times I've told this story? You think anybody cares anymore? And I said, absolutely. But for us, it's not really about that here. I mean, it's what we've been doing when we meet people, say, hey, let's talk about how you got in the music business, how it started, how you got here, and we can share the Achy Breaky story later a little bit. But, your story's a lot bigger than that and a lot more fun.
What are you doing here?
Yeah. Well, where do you start?
That's it.
I guess one of the first things I remember in my household as a tiny little kid is that there was always music. There was always a radio. In fact, Harold will remember these. We had a big console radio with a built-in record player.
That's right.
And my dad had a lot of 78s, and even as a tiny little kid, he let me play these 78 records. So got to hear a lot of big bands, but I like the singers. I like Bing Crosby and Gene Autry and Mills Brothers.
Oh yeah,
man,
listen to you.
Yeah, and then later my sister, who was 7 years older than me, got a job, and she bought the new kind of record player, with the pop-up top, and started bringing home records like, of course, Elvis, Frankie Lyman, Clyde McPhatter, Pat Boone, and most important, Mr. Richard Penniman on Specialty.
Oh yeah,
records.
Little Richard.
Yeah, man.
And so that I think when I heard the Little Richard stuff, I decided something clicked in me at a very early age, probably around 7 or 8.
Wow.
So that's how it kind of started, I guess.
Yeah. So when did you start actually playing and stuff?
Boy, I think 1963, I was in my first band. The year before that, though, I had written as a kind of a younger guy. I started writing poetry, really bad poetry. But the Montgomery Ward Christmas catalog, if anybody remembers what that was, had a contest where it was like 4 lines of a poem and you fill in the last line. And I did that, and I won like $75.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
but of course back then it was like Wheel of Fortune. You didn't really get $75. You got to pick out $75 worth of stuff from the catalog, and so I picked a portable typewriter and an Airline acoustic guitar.
Wow. Airline. I haven't seen
Yeah,
that
man.
in a long time.
Do
Wow.
you still have that?
Boy, I wish I did,
Yeah.
but no, I don't.
Go ahead. Keep.
Yeah. Do I need to be closer?
That's good. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was kind of foretelling, I guess, what might lie ahead for me. But I think '63, I had learned enough on the acoustic to know that I'd better go to 4 strings instead of 6, and so I bought a Silvertone bass and a Silvertone bass amp, and soon after that got into a band called the Continentals. This was in Toledo, Ohio, and it was me and 3 other guys. And we started out, of course, like I guess everybody did back then, playing Ventures and Lonnie Mack and Santo and Johnny, and but loved it. I mean, I knew then that this is me. This
Yeah,
is
you're in
what-
the 60s now.
yeah. So '63, about '65, I guess, we decided to go from being an instrumental group to a vocal group too. And
Yeah.
so, in fact, that you probably know if the date is right, but back then in Toledo, Ohio, they would have battles of the bands. And so it was a big thing to get all these bands to play for nothing, bring all your friends, pay to get in. The band's got nothing. You either got to win or lose. But oddly enough, on this particular day, when we decided to go vocal, the opening act was the New Beats. So it was Larry Henley.
Right. How about that?
Which was pretty amazing. And we were, I guess, when these acts would come to Toledo and played Saturday night, then they were required to, on Sunday, come and do something with the radio station. So the poor old New Beats had to show up. But anyway, we had picked for our song. You probably know the writer of this song, Russ. Do You Love Me?
Do you love?
Yeah. And so we decided I was the singer, and evidently the whole crowd knew this, but I didn't. But in Toledo,
I thought you meant that you were going to be the singer. Go ahead.
no, but in Toledo, if you sang "Do You Love Me," when you sang "Do You Love Me," the whole crowd would answer "Hell no." And so, man, I'm singing this song, and it's my first time with a microphone, and it was, it was a pivotal moment because I either like start crying and run off the stage, or muscle through. But that was when I made the leap to vocalist.
So you hit the first phrase, and everybody said, "Hell no!"
Hell no! I mean, and not just a few. Everybody.
It's a good thing they didn't say lover's question.
Yeah. Oh man, Clyde McFadder, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know. A lot of bands after that. In Toledo, it was a real competitive thing. So I kept striving to be in better bands, and finally got into what I thought was probably the best cover band in town. It's called the Rogues. And when I did, after I'd been with them a few months, the guitar player and I wrote a song, and we recorded it. And it must have been on a 1-track or something. It was in somebody's garage, and the song was prophetic. It was titled "I Can't Make It Any Place," but it was kind of a boy-girl song. But so anyway, we had a manager, David Frumpkin, then, and we all piled in a station wagon with a U-Haul, and with this record in hand, we were going to New York to be famous.
Yeah.
And And there were that was the plan. I mean, there were no details. It's like somebody was going to be there at the border, you know, like, God, we've heard of you, you know. But anyway, like Levon said, New York kicked our ass and we went home with the tail between our legs. But then, more and more groups finally started writing some more stuff and recording. And it was a time when radio started to go to FM and started playing a different genre of music. But in Toledo, one of the AM stations would have like an underground thing on Saturday night, and we had a couple things that they would play. And God, where from then? This story seems really boring to me. Do you want to hear any more?
Yeah. Yes, it's interesting.
It's interesting.
So while we were doing this, we started hanging out with, we started playing at the Grandy Ballroom some in Detroit and opening for acts. And in doing that, we met like the MC5 and Jimmy Osterberger, who called himself Iggy Stooge back then.
Man, real cutting edge acts though, yeah.
Yeah, MC5 is the baddest rock and roll outfit that ever stepped on a stage.
Yeah.
And Iggy, the first time I saw him, I knew I'd seen something that nobody had ever seen before, you know. So Elektra Records signed both of those guys, and at that time, I forget who the fellow was, but he was kind of interested in our band. And we were supposed to go play the Fifth Dimension Club in Ann Arbor for this guy, not a proper showcase, but he was just going to be there. And and our guitar player did too much LSD, and we didn't go.
End of story. That's the way they.
Yeah, pretty much. So end of story. And then not soon after that, I got my invitation to join an organization, and then end up in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, can we talk along the journey? Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's a part of who you are. Not detail, but I mean,
Yeah.
so you went to Vietnam,
yeah.
and what was your job in Vietnam?
It was a very bizarre job. I usually don't tell people this because it sounds like bullshit. But I was in a chemical detachment, which the Army didn't talk much about. But I ran a machine called a sniffer. And one of the jobs I had, that was my primary job. So this machine would sample, it had a skid-mounted air intake on it. And we'd fly to treetop level and set a background of an area. And then if there was effluent in the air, like dust or even stuff from your clothes, it would, this machine would measure that. So we would fly predetermined grids and try to determine if there was somebody on the ground or not. But then when it became really interesting is that if we did like what was called a pink team, which was armed aerial reconnaissance, we'd go out one helicopter with me on the treetop, and then we'd have two armed helicopters behind us. And so my job at that point would be to try to find people on the ground, and then we would actually kind of taunt them, and they would inevitably fire at us. And then our job at that point was to fly back and forth and get these people to shoot at us. And then I would throw a smoke grenade, and then our friends in the Cobras would come in and make sure their day was a lot worse than ours.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I guess that's a little more scary than having to do your first vocal in front of people. But yeah,
I don't know.
oh my God,
man.
yeah, I don't know. I know you've told me some of those stories, and you know a little bit, and it's like, God, I can't believe what a thing. But anyway,
Yeah.
go ahead. I just wanted you to touch on that.
So anyway,
and thank you for your service. Obviously,
you know.
Yeah, I know how. But anyway,
Yeah. Anyway, so I don't know. I did a little over a year there, and it's
Long enough.
yeah, it's a life-changing thing, you know.
Yeah.
So came back, started a business out in Tucson, Arizona for a while. A very successful business. It's still there, and just decided it wasn't for me, and I still wanted to pursue music. So I sold my interest in a up and coming business, and bought like a giant bass amplifier.
Good move.
Oh, it was great. It was
Great investment.
Brilliant, man, and moved back to Ann Arbor. And then, years of playing in bars with different groups. I played around Detroit. John Sinclair. I had a little basement room that under a store in Ann Arbor that I'd turned into a bedroom and studio. And John Sinclair, who was MC5's manager, who was kind of like a Detroit version of Allen Ginsberg.
Sure.
He started managing Mitch Ryder's Second Coming, which was a group called Detroit.
Right.
And so they didn't have a place to rehearse, and so I let them rehearse in my bedroom, basically, for a while. So, but anyway, still had that dream of music. A lot of big clubs in northern Ohio and Michigan back then. So played those, but nothing was happening. And I remember, kind of like the final straw was, I think we played it someplace for like 2 weeks or something, and went to get paid, and we owed them money.
I think Harold back in both of them. Sure, yeah.
And so it was like, it's time to get out of Toledo. And so I put music on hold for a while and got married. And had a couple of beautiful kids. And then, around 1980, met you.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Behind the Shed. Today's sponsors are PopChevy.com, Paintsville Tourism, Wild Bill Fireworks, and the Kent Rose Foundation.
Yeah, but when did you move to Tennessee?
1975.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Now, where did you move to in Tennessee?
Wayne County, Tennessee.
Oh, Waynesboro?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So
Wayne County, I know where
yeah,
that is.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, you moved almost to Alabama.
Well, I had in mind at that time Muscle Shoals. I was hearing a lot about Muscle Shoals, and so I thought I had the dream of music, and then my wife.
If you don't mind, what was the country music scene in Baltimore like? What was that like?
In where? In
Baltimore.
No, he was in Michigan.
Oh, in Michigan, I was.
Oh, wow.
Well, I really didn't. No, I didn't pay any attention to country music then.
You were rock and roll.
I was, but of course, back then radio would play every kind of music.
That's right.
So you could hear country music, you could hear pop music, soul music. Q Sakamoto had a big hit. Mm-hmm. But when I finally hooked up with Russ in Muscle Shoals, I think didn't my friends Jim Coaster and Chris Benji, didn't they meet you at the airport ran into you at the airport or something?
I don't remember how we met anymore. They probably remember better than I do.
Uh-huh.
But before we go to that though, so you were writing songs by that time?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Excuse me. You've been writing all along, right?
I've been trying. Yeah, I've been writing. Yeah, I played some stuff. Did a couple of sessions at some proper studios, but I didn't have much money, and they weren't well recorded. And I was still trying to figure out how to write a good song.
Yeah.
At that point.
But you've been writing all those years.
Yes,
I know,
sir.
yes, you were a kid. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I remember. So at that point, you'd moved down there and close to Muscle Shoals. I'd moved to the Shoals in 1979, and my memory's not as good as it used to be. But I know this much. You were the first paying customer to come into my studio down there that I'd set up.
Oh, man.
Don't you remember that?
Uh-huh.
And you guys came in. And I had met Jim or Chris, your friends. I forget how I'd met them. Mm-hmm. And you guys came in, and you came with a drummer that day. You were supposed to have a drummer, and we cut a song called "Price" on my head. And he said, "Well, you play drums, don't you?" I said, and I'm like Harold. Like Harold said when he first came to town, He said, somebody said, well, are you a musician? He said, well, hell, I thought I was till I got here. Well, I'd been in Muscle Shoals for 4 or 5 months, seeing all those great players. And I'm going, you said, no, don't you play drums? No, I don't play drums. Yeah, you do. So remember, I played on that session.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But so that's when we first met. And that was like 1980. So at that time, what were you doing for a living?
I was an iron worker
Yep.
at that point. So
you were working long days and come home writing songs?
yeah, writing songs.
I know you were writing a lot then.
Yeah, I'd bought a little, the Fostex came out with a little cassette 4-track thing, and I, of course, learned how to bounce, and so I was doing little demos on that. So, but being there at Cactus,
Which was my little studio. Go ahead.
yeah, well, Russ had taken, he was this genius that came from Texas Instruments, and had
The Texas Instruments part's real. Yeah, go ahead.
and Russ had re-engineered some of this Tascam equipment. I guess it was an 8-track, right, and a board, and this stuff sounded great. And so started doing demos with Russ of my songs, and then he'd pay me like $5 to do sing.
15
It was not. Yeah.
to sing other demos. Yeah.
Might have been 8. It was 20, I think, actually. But singing other folk stuff, and so I was starting to learn about songwriting a little more, because we were in a place that was really rich with writers and musicians. Ava Aldridge kind of took me under her wing and introduced me to like Lenny LeBlanc, and took me over to Muscle Shoals Sound, met Barry, and started hanging with people that were way above my pay grade.
That's the way I felt at the time too with me.
You
Yeah, that was, and Ava, by the way, I want to say one thing about Ava. She was like the godmother to all songwriters of that era. She took us all under her wing and taught us, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I just remember about that time when we started working together. You'd write songs and we'd go in and do demos. And what's interesting about that era was there were all these young guys coming up, new guys in the music business. And our rhythm section, after we got going a little bit, included 2 of the most recorded guys, actually 3 really,
3.
2 of the most recorded guys in history, Mike Chapman and Milton Sledge, who went on to play on all the Garth records and got real hot up here. I know, Harold, you worked with him and stuff. And a guy named John Willis, who's still hot in this town, guitar player. But that's who we had playing, and they were all playing for pretty much nothing because we wanted to learn how to make records.
Absolutely.
We'll play for free. We want to learn how to make records.
There you go.
And that's interesting. But anyway, go ahead, Don. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was going to mention that next, because that was, what a gift that was.
Yeah.
To work with those guys. Good Lord. And I had, and at that point, I just kind of figured, well, shoot, everybody's that good, but it turned out that
not so.
they weren't, because there were people at Muscle Shoals Sound, I know, with an ear listening to the stuff you were doing. I know Roger Hawkins mentioned that later on, David Hood. So what happened then?
Well, let's see. I wrote some of that. No, I'm kidding. But I remember at that point us doing all those demos and going back and forth to Nashville and sending stuff to New York and LA and all that stuff. We got some interest on those songs early on. I just remember, those songs you were writing back then didn't sound like anybody else's. They were real different and unique. And of course, when I came to the Music Mill, you start bringing songs up there and stuff. And I always tell this story, and you'll correct some of it. I'm sure it's the way I remember it. But anyway, Don would come in and play me songs. And I'd have to look up half the words in the dictionary. I go, what does that word mean? They were these epic tells, but nobody was doing that. And they were always really unique and cool. And I loved them. But I thought, well, what can we do with this? I never did know. On most of them, we got close on a couple things, but he was writing songs, and then by that time we had Tony Hazelton and Jimmy Stewart and all those guys, and I'd come in and after he left me songs, I'd play them for them. And they'd go, "Oh my God, that's incredible!" We'd go, but where can we take that? I don't know, but they were always really unique, cool songs. But you heard a bunch of them, you go, man, that's really good, But anyway, leading up to the story we've told a million times, and don't go through it real deep because we've done it a million times, but up to that point, you had been playing songs, and you had come to see me. I'm going to jump ahead to this now, unless you want to tell me more. Okay, because I don't want to. I know you. And so you had come up to see me, and I do remember this like it was yesterday. I'll probably get some of it wrong, but you had come up, and I was having a particularly busy day. Because I know you'll elaborate on that.
Yeah, no.
And you, well, first of all, you'd been to see me a few weeks before and played me a couple of songs, and I remember you were so dejected. 'Cause I'm going, Don, this is great, but I just don't know what to do with it. And we were talking about it, and I remember you left kind of dejected. And 2 weeks later, I'm going to say it wasn't very long. You came back one day, and said, I really want to play you something. Yeah, okay, great. And I almost missed it because I was so busy. I mean, I really was that day. And you finally got me to sit down and listen. And there were 3 songs on a cassette, as I remember.
Yeah.
And one of them was called Don't Tell My Heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was one of the coolest demos you ever did. I don't think it was multi-track. It might have been on your 4-track. I don't know.
It was 4-track.
Was it?
But,
well, you could make 4-track sound like one really good, man. It sounded, I'm kidding. But it was maybe the best version of that song ever recorded to me. And it was Don, and you can tell the story about how you wrote the song and did the demo that night.
I was at my sister's house in Cleveland, Tennessee, and every night at the end of I was hanging wallpaper then, like 10 hours a day. And so at the end of the day, I'd always had the 4-track there and try to do something, to try to maybe get my foot in the door, and decided to write a song about how breaking up wouldn't be so bad if the heart wasn't involved, which is kind of an absurd notion. Anyway.
Yeah, how you going to do that?
Yeah, there you go. So my sister had a Thomas organ that had a percussion section on it, and
Best drum sound ever.
Yeah, oh man, it was great. So I hit I think it was called Foxtrot. It was like boom, boom, and as I think a lot of songwriters or successful songwriters will tell you that sometimes they don't know how to write the song, that it was a gift. And this little gift fell out of the air that night. And so I wrote, I guess, a verse, right? A chorus, the lick, the crazy, goofy lick, and the woo part. So it was, I think that's what I played for you. And boy, it was the first time ever that I thought, I have written a good song. And took it up to you, of course. Russ had a busy day. So, he heard it. It was like, yeah, okay, that's okay. And I went home in dejection again, remembered the time the whole crowd had told me, hell no. And, but you called me later that night and said, whoa, I've listened to this again. Write a second verse and do not co-write with anybody on this. And so I did, brought it back to you, and soon after that, I guess we went over with Keith to 805 and did the demo. Am I missing anything?
Well, of course, I remembered a little different, and you're probably right. I remembered that we heard it and we loved it, and I said, don't co-write. And then I don't know why now that you mentioned, I always thought you walked across the hall and came back with the second verse. I'm sure you're probably right. It was probably a day later, but I know this, as you say that, I do remember this part. I had that work tape, and I called a bunch of the other writers in, good friends of ours, Tony and Jimmy and all of those guys, and played it, and they're going, oh my God. But even they were going, wow, man, that's Don for sure. And I remember Tony said, I'll never forget. I don't know what it has to do with it. We all died laughing. Where's me fuzz tone, Ringo? For some reason. We all thought that was the funniest thing in the world. But yeah, whenever you came back, hours or days, however long it was, you had the second verse, and we got Mitchell. He was our tape copy guy. This is the cool thing about the music mill. There were great players everywhere in that building, writers and stuff. And our tape copy guy, Mitchell Shedd, was an incredible drummer. And every time we wanted to do a quick demo, we'd get him and go across to our demo studio, 805, and I'd get whoever was there, Tony or one of the guys, and Jimmy would play bass and stuff, and we'd go over and do a demo. But we went across the street, and we had Keith Hinton there that day.
Keith Hinton. Yeah.
Who went on to play on a bunch of records, great player that wrote for us, and Mitch, and we didn't have a bass player. And my ex-wife, Debbie, showed up, if you remember, and she was a bass player, and she played on the initial track. We didn't keep it because Keith came back over. And we did it that way, and we did it in 30 minutes, and I remember going, the thing I've told a million times was one of the most important parts of that song was the lick. Da, 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 and I'm going, we can do better than that. This guy Keith's trying to find licks for me, and Don's going, don't change my lick, please. And I'm going, yeah, listen, I know what I'm doing here. Just, Don, I got the gold record. Hang on. Okay, let's try something else. Let's try something else. And finally, he convinced me not to change that lick. Thank you, God. Oh, my God. And we got it and got the demo. And I just remember, after you finished singing it that day, we're like, oh, my God, we got something here.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I remember Stan Muncie coming up and congratulating me after hearing that. So I thought, man, here we go.
Yeah. So
and then there we went.
Yeah. So for like 2 years, pretty much nothing happens with this song, obviously. And I've told it like you have a million times. People either loved it or hated it. Mostly hated, as I remember, because that's the ones you remember.
Yeah.
But anyway, so during that period of time, those 2 years from the day we demoed, and I think it was 90 or 90, wasn't it, or so?
89.
Might have been 89. I think it was 2 or 3 years old. So what are you doing during that period of time? You're writing songs still, but what were you doing?
Hanging wallpaper in nursing homes.
And you were going across the country doing them, right?
Thousands and thousands of rolls of wallpaper in new nursing homes, old nursing homes, and retirement centers. Yeah.
Where were you hanging wallpaper? What town?
Well, when I first heard from you, I was in Thomasville, Georgia.
I thought it was.
Yeah, absolutely. So could we jump ahead to that?
Okay, well, yeah, let's just say that during that period, you didn't quit writing for 3 years. You were writing songs, but you were hanging wallpaper. Okay, go ahead.
And so we demoed the song, and of course the Marcy Brothers cut it with little success. And then I finally heard that this guy that Harold had signed from Kentucky had cut it and was all excited about it. And at that point in time, I thought the song was just gone and out there in the ether somewhere. And the fact that some new guy from Kentucky cut it was like, well,
yeah, because
so what?
Yeah, we had moments where I'd call and say, hey, man, somebody likes this song. And, you'd heard it 100 times. I'd heard it 100 times. Go ahead.
Yeah, so, and then I guess what made me start to wonder is I finally met Billy at the Music Mill.
This is after the fact or after the record?
After he had recorded it, but it wasn't out yet.
Okay.
I met him in your office. He played me Some Gave All He Knew. I was a Vietnam vet, and I thanked him for that. He thanked me for Achy Breaky, and he asked if I had kids, and I said yeah. And he said I've got some stuff out in the car, and so he went out and got a couple swag things, a couple hats and shirts or something that had his name on it, and we walked out of the door at the Music Mill under the parking lot, and the sidewalks out there, and there were 3 women walking down that sidewalk, and they saw Billy Ray and stopped in their tracks. And I thought, may have something here. So, and then of course, record after much, according to Billy, long delay and frightened that the Marcy Brothers were going to have a single and stuff, the record comes out, and which I guess leads me to Thomasville, Georgia, and I'm hanging wallpaper, and I get a call over the PA that somebody wants to talk to me, and of course I'm thinking, well, shit, and so I go to the office and answer the phone, and it's Harold Shedd, who's still to me kind of this mythical character. I'd seen him. He was an institution already, and so Harold says to me, Don, I think you hit a home run. 8 words. And then I waited for the rest of the conversation. And there wasn't one. I was like, well, okay, thanks. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Bye. But then that night, I guess because of that, in Thomasville or somewhere near there's a radio station. They had like a little countdown every night. And so I listened, 5, 4, 3. And I thought, one comes on, and it's that song. It's the first time I heard it on a radio. First time I'd heard it on the radio, which was my dream. That was my goal. I wanted to hear one of my songs on a radio.
Yeah.
And you had said that a lot of times, yeah?
Yeah, so that happened, and then the next thing I hear is you tell me, Russ tells me, well, it's sold like 80,000 copies, and I thought, yes, this, that's it. That's what more could you want than that?
Yeah.
So then, what did it feel like when you heard your song for the first time?
It was total elation. Number one, it sounded good. I mean, the record sounded like nothing else back then, if y'all remember. So I don't know if there's any way to really describe it.
Were you in your hotel room?
No, I was actually. Sometimes when I was doing these places, they'd let me stay in an empty room. So I was in an empty room. I mean, an unoccupied room, except for me at this Thomasville Retirement Center. And there just happened to be a clock radio there that was part of the, wow. The furniture in the room. And so, that was as big a day in my life, I guess.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a situation when you were in Chicago and WGN came in and interviewed you?
Well, that was after the song had hit.
Okay, I didn't remember. Okay.
And so I'm still hanging wallpaper while the song is just blowing up around the world. And in fact, I was in a hotel somewhere one night and fallen asleep with the TV on and woke up and it was on CNN. And there were 4 Japanese guys in cowboy hats standing in front of Mount Fuji, singing "Achy Breaky Heart."
You called me.
Yeah, so it was absolutely huge. It was everywhere. And then I was in Chicago, or actually Whiting, right outside of Chicago, in a nursing home that was occupied. So I was hanging wallpaper in the hallways and stuff, and 3 things happened that day. Somehow everybody found out where I was. So what were the kind of pulp first or hard copy or what? There were 2 or 3
those little
like TV rag things, and so those people called and did an interview, and then these people from WGN. Which is ABC affiliate, big ABC affiliate in Chicago. It was then.
Big station.
Yeah, came in with the full crew. So I'm hanging wallpaper and telling this story, and then it's starting to sink in, and that things are never going to be the same, and largely thanks to this fella right
Amen.
here, who had the vision to, among many other acts, see that Billy Ray had some potential.
Yeah, I got to say one thing before Harold jumps in here. And again, that phone call that day. So I remember that one really well because it was really starting to happen, and I was talking to you on a fairly regular basis, but you weren't getting the whole gist of it still at that point because, we were in the thick of it down here at Ground Zero. And Harold called me and said, you have Don Von Tress's number? And I said, yeah. He said, I want to kind of call him and tell him what's going on. I said, that'd be great, man. I gave him the number. As we've talked about, Harold is not like me when something good happens. I talk fast and I'm excited, or like you. You're less than me, obviously, that way too. But Harold never gets really, he's excited. It's just still the same. And so that day he called you and you called me later. It's like Harold said, I think you really got one here, and you said, You said that was sort of like for anybody else having a marching band walking down the street leading with a baton and everything, you know. But I knew that. You weren't aware of that.
No, I just thought, you know. But that was significant, obviously.
So I think that's when you called me and said, man, I'm thinking about quitting this gig and coming back home. You know, will you sign me to a writer? Go ahead and sign me to a writer's deal. I said, absolutely. Come on, man. Come home. You know, there was a funny story before we went further. Clyde Bright, who was all our accountant at the time pretty much, and he was mine and he became yours and everything. Wasn't there a situation where you were going to try to you were going to quit your job and everything and go buy a new car and get a loan at the bank? And and if I'm getting this wrong, correct me, but the guy was weird about signing on your signature, and Clyde called him up and said, I think I'd give him anything he wants.
Yeah, I still have that car, by the way.
I know, that Land Cruiser, yeah. Well, it changed. That changed quick, man. So,
Goodness gracious.
All that stuff's blowing up, you know, and I'm getting a daily thing from Harold about what's going on. You know, of course, you didn't have that luxury. I tried to call you and tell you what I knew, but it wasn't the same as hearing it straight from him, you know.
Yeah.
Was that 1992?
Yeah. Spring of 1992. I believe, was it the single or the album that was released on Jim Cotton's birthday?
Oh, you know, I don't know. March, was it March was a single?
March 16th, I think.
I think that's the single, wasn't it, Harold, when it March? You remember?
I don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it blew up, and I remember, you know, Harold called me one day, and I know I called you immediately and said.
It was about, that's right.
March.
Yeah. It was 2 or 3 months before CMA week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we were having all the shows
at
the old racetrack.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, man. Boy, that was a zoo, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Is that not right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or was it the fairground?
Yes, it was. It was fairgrounds, yeah.
But the show was at the racetrack.
Yeah.
I mean,
The
the stage.
fanfare,
Yeah.
The old fanfare. Yeah. So then you came back and quit the gig, and we signed you to a writer's deal. And then right after that, you started working with Billy, right?
Well, when they started working on the second record, it won't be the last. Joe and Jim insisted that I be there every day, even when
Joe and Jim produced the record.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jim Cotton and Joe Scaife, of course, who produced the record. Bless their hearts, are both departed now. But they really wanted me to be there, and so it was, you know, it was a great joy for me to be in the studio and to be in the studio at the Millhouse. You had that brand new Focusrite.
That's right.
Something I'd never seen before. It looked like it was from outer space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so on that second album, I ended up playing guitar on a couple tracks. And sang a lot of harmonies with Billy. It turned out me and BR liked to sing harmonies better than we did lead vocals. But when that was over, he asked me if I wanted to join the band, and I told him, you know, I've lived in band houses. I've lived with bands for years, and I do not want to pile on it. I mean, thank you. And I love the band guys, but I do not want to pile on a bus having a perpetual slumber party, you know, with a bunch of guys. And Billy said, well, how about if the band travels in a bus and you and I travel in a Learjet? And I thought about it about 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And he was, if you look in the Guinness World Records, I think highest paid guitarist with the least talent of guitar playing, that was me. So those two things, and I joined the band. I was one of the Sly Dogs. So
wow.
So we were at that point hitting it every day, every night, you know, all over the dang place. So that was quite an experience, and all because of Mr. Shedd.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Tell Tom Bodett I won't need that room tonight.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. You know, it's funny how that's
Everything about Achy Breaky was different. I do remember I think was you talking earlier, how many singles it pre-sold? Was that you?
No, we were talking about cassettes earlier.
Cassettes. And,
Bart had that number from somewhere.
Yeah.
What? How many was that?
He said it was 11 million.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Could have been.
Boy.
Because I remember Donnie, he would call me ever so often from, and he's always,
Donnie Canada?
yeah, where are you? Well, I'm at such and such a supermarket. And there are two little girls in front of me, and they've just bought every single of Billy Ray.
Wow.
They're out. These two girls just bought them all. So then I thought about that. I said, well, maybe that is right,
Could be, yeah.
because I know the album sales were initially much more than we thought they were.
I remember that, yeah.
I thought I'd heard at some point that y'all stopped selling the singles because they were afraid it would cannibalize or people wouldn't be buying the.
That was part of it, part of the conversation. I remember that.
But boy, it didn't seem to.
But you can't change that. No. You can't tell people how they're going to buy.
Yeah, but y'all turned it back on because I remember Steve Miller told me, he said, we thought it was going to hurt the album sales. And he said, so we didn't see any slacks. We said,
no, it helped
the single again. They turned it back on again. Yeah. So,
it actually helped it.
Yeah, man. That was, I remember you calling me and, because he would tell me numbers. I would never have known that, Well, we just shipped another 600,000, whatever the number was, And,
yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, man.
Bigger than anything I'd ever seen.
It was crazy. Which we thought it was crazy because, I'm from Eastern Kentucky and Billy Ray's from Eastern Kentucky. So see a video on CMT with the Paramount Theater in Ashland, it was a big deal for people in Eastern Kentucky.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People around the world thought that was some magical place somewhere. I mean, I saw that. I'd never been there. I've been in that part of the country. But
where
never
we did
saw
the
that.
video?
Yeah. It looked like some big party going on in some cool place somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and what a lot of people didn't understand, I think a lot of people thought that crowd was staged and all, but those were people that loved.
Twice as many people as the theater would hold showed up.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there were just people everywhere and people still trying to get there, It was crazy.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by everything about it was really, really different.
Yeah. I got to tell you, you talk about being touched by the master's hand. You've used that a couple of times, that phrase. I got to tell you something. Everything was ordained on that project. And I go back to me trying to change the lick, thinking it was goofy and wouldn't work. A year after that, but before that record, if you walked into a guitar store and a kid was playing guitar and practicing, checking out guitars, they all played, Every kid, you'd hear it in every record store or music store you went into. A year later, you'd hear da 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 da. I mean, I remember being in a music store and hearing that and going, "Thank you, Lord." Thank you so much. Because I tried hard. If you remember, I didn't want to keep that lick.
And that's having heard nearly every version of international, all these crazy translations. The lyric wouldn't be anywhere near the English because the heart doesn't even mean the same thing in a lot of, but all the hundreds of covers around the world, the one thing that's always there is
absolutely. I'd like to tell you how smart I am, but, I almost screwed that up for forever and ever. You talk about those translations and you mentioned that. It's funny because about 3 or 4 months into that record, I started getting the approval for translations because Polygram International administered us, and they had to come through us personally to approve it.
Yeah.
So they would send me the translation back in English to approve it because you're right. In some cultures, heart has nothing to do with love. It just means I had a heart attack and died.
Yeah.
And I think, and I may be wrong about this, I think it was Swahili. It was one of those languages. I mean, really, you would never guess we'd have a country song in. And they sent it back, and it was exactly that. And I read the lyric, and I called you for some of them to say, "Are you okay?" And finally, we said, "Yeah, we'll just do it all." You know, if it's not hurting anybody. But you know, we get those translations, and sometimes it was, you know, it just they had to write it that way. You know.
It's just still every day I wake up and I'm very aware of how fortunate I was, you know, and like you said, if one little thing had changed, I think if one little iota had changed, it was like, you know, this is going to happen.
Yeah, it was kind of already pre-planned.
Yep.
Yeah, it seemed like it. Didn't
Absolutely.
Yeah, it does seem like that.
And I remember.
I'll accept that.
Yeah, heck yeah.
I remember, I've told this a bunch of times too, but every time Harold would go to sign an act in town, invariably I'd get phone calls, you know, say, "Man, I heard Harold signing this." Yeah. He's lost his mind. And that was a big one. I don't know, you were, you know, not in the center of it then, but, you know, everybody thought that was nuts. And I remember when that record first came out, because everybody in town knew that song. I'd worn them out with it, you know, and I'd get calls, you know, "Good try, man, ha ha ha." And, you know, you remember for the first few weeks, it didn't blow up.
Yeah.
It was when the kid that had cerebral palsy, had never stood, got up and danced, and they said he was healed.
Yeah.
And then the women that went on strike down in Florida the next day, and it was all over the UP. And all of a sudden, everything started happening.
Yeah.
You know? And I remember before I called you that one day, I think before Harold called you, he had called me, and he said, "Man," he said, you were in your car or whatever. He said, "Man, they're using the P word now." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Phenomenon." And you know what? It really was. I mean, it was a phenomenon. That I don't know that you could tell that story ever, you know, there's songs that have been blown up, but, you know, in the end, we talk about all the big records today and breaking records. And we just had my buddy Eric in here talking about the Shabuzi record that broke all these records. And it's a great record, and it deserves it. It flew up the charts, the biggest record of the year this past year. But when we were talking about back then, there's a little bit of difference, and I don't know how much they'll learn on that from streaming. But Brian Rawlings made the point here one day, who ran Disney out there forever and was doing all those big, you know, High School Musical and stuff. And he said, "Well, you got to remember, in those days, when they sold 10 million records, you know, take that times 10, and that was, you know, what was coming in cash-wise. It's a different world. So, you know, that was like from here to there, you know, just crazy."
Yeah, how fortunate to have been at that pinnacle, you know. And then, of course, back then, there was broadcast and there was print.
Print?
That was pretty much it. But that BR, it was either BR and the song or the song. And every magazine you would open, every TV show it would be on. People quoting it, watching a sporting event or something. So it was just, it's still, to this day, it's still a little bit unbelievable to me.
Now that happened.
Well, it was a once in a lifetime thing
Absolutely.
for us, but also for the industry too. I'm sorry.
I just said now, if it happened, it would just be, you know, you'll never believe it streamed 25 million times yesterday. How much money did I make? Keep hanging wallpaper.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
Yeah, sorry, didn't quite get there.
Yeah. You know, another thing that's really interesting to me too is, you know, I've worked with a lot of writers over the years and you know, done what we've done. And even through all that, Don still writes songs. Don still records. He's got a studio in his house and he's constantly sending me songs, has been over the years and stuff. You still, you know.
It's I think McCartney called it an affliction, didn't he? A hopeless affliction.
Yeah.
The 3 Ps.
Yep. And in a lot of ways better than ever, you know.
Well,
Who is that guy on the 3 Ps?
3 Ps.
The
Alec.
3 Ps, yeah.
I don't know those.
Alec Trebek.
This is since we had it first with Phenomenon.
Yeah.
The guys sell some kind of insurance. What's
Alec Trebek, I think. Isn't
oh hell?
Price.
Colonial Pen.
Yeah, there you go.
Are they sponsoring us?
That's
Big
close
three.
to Trebek.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I better be careful. We might need a sponsor.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You know, my best memory of Achy Breaky Heart, and I'm sure you know this story, Don, but Billboard, I think they had about 156 or 7 reporting stations that made up what they call the panel. And to have a number 1 record, you had to have the panel. But at a certain time, we knew in advance what it was going to do and not do. And we knew it was going to go number 1, but there was a station in South Florida that would not play the record, and I think it was Sam Cerami or Gene Hughes at the time. They were both in promotion, and he said, "Do you know so and so at such and such a station?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, would you call him and see if you can get him to play the record?" Excuse me. I said, he's not playing the record. He said, "No, but he's the only guy not playing it out of all the reporting stations." So I called him, and he said, "Well, I'm trying to tell him, you're doing a crazy thing." And he says, "Well, I'll get it to the PD and the MD and the OP and OM, and I'll get it to all these people, and we'll have a meeting Monday, and I'll let you know." I said, "What? You the only guy not playing it?" And okay. So I got a letter. He didn't even call me. And so that kind of pissed me a little bit. But he wrote me a letter and said, "We have done all of this stuff. We've had all of our music people, and we still think it's nothing but a 3-chord country song." And so, well, right away, I can't believe all these people listened to it and still didn't know how many chords were in it. I wrote it on the back of the letter that he wrote me. I just turned it over, wrote it. Said, "Look, this may not help you guys on this record, but maybe in the future. But it still only has 2 chords in it." That's funny.
Oh man, wonder how that turned out for that person.
They went on the record.
They did. They did.
They did.
Shoot, they had to. I mean, I guess they had to. It got so big. That's
Well, yeah. You don't want to look that crazy.
Yeah.
no kidding. Yeah, man. It was funny. I mean, all those, after you mentioned earlier, all the translations, but all the covers that started happening, translations, and Weird Al Yankovic, who was really an institution
Weird
back then.
Al.
If you had a hit record and he wanted to do your song, that was a big deal. Of course, he did one. It's just completely. No Rompus Mas is still it's still a thing in Mexico.
It's part of their culture.
Yeah, it is. We talked about that dance they do and everything.
Four corners dance.
Yeah.
Any fiesta, wedding.
Yep.
It's a mainstay.
Yep. Yep. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, the whole thing was, even the dance and
Yep.
Yeah, we had a number 1 Christian song. Remember?
I don't remember.
Jesus will heal your achy breaky
Oh,
heart.
I do. I do remember that now.
That's right.
Number
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, man.
Contemporary Christian.
Yeah. Wow, I forgot that
It
one.
was huge in Germany. It was, I mean, hits.
France. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a couple covers in France, I remember. I don't remember them anymore, but we had to approve after they translated French and back, Man, it was just, it was everywhere.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
Well, it was an incredible song that did a lot for us as a company,
Yeah.
and it did a lot for the country because of the effect it had on people when they heard it and that kind of thing.
Wasn't the line dance created at the Music Mill for that song as well?
No, at Mercury.
Mercury. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, tell
Yeah,
that.
that happened we had a staff meeting every Monday morning, and it was an opportunity to recap everything we were doing, and then, well, what are we going to do about this, and planning program and all that, and so the marketing part of it, I'm not a marketing person, but we had here again a lot of really intelligent people in the company that we had a great staff of people. Everyone knew what their job was to, and they really knew how to do that. So, in a meeting one morning, we were talking about the marketing part and what can we do that's a little different. And so Claudia Mize had been with Mercury for a long, long time, and she was. We had changed her job description to the point that she could be in these meetings on Monday that we had. So she says, why don't we do a line dance? She said, line dancing is really starting to happen, and there's nothing about line dancing. And so, well, that's interesting,
Wow.
And so then someone else says, well, I know somebody that was a choreographer in Vegas and makes up dances, and why don't we get her to come in? And well, so this lady turned out to be Lee Greenwood's ex-wife. So she came in and created this dance, and well, okay, so, and fortunately we did it real quickly, and the video, and then about 2 weeks after that, there was another line dance song,
Oh. Mm-hmm.
and I don't know when they started their planning, but the song dictated their song, Boot Scoot
Boogie. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they had to do something similar to what we were doing because Achy Breaky and the line dance was a brand new thing, man. I mean, Papa got a brand new bag. But it was happening. It was, it was going. So it just changed so many things in so many places in so many ways.
Yeah, man.
It was a phenomenon.
Yeah. I don't know why.
Wasn't my life. I know.
Yeah. I remember we went out to the Pop Awards. We got a BMI Pop Award for that song. And when we were out in L.A., and this guy, Eugene Record, famous songwriter, wrote all the Chi Light songs and everything, Old Girl and all that stuff. He was getting all these billionaire awards and stuff. he was all over Don. And they put us up on bleachers to take a group picture, of everybody, the publishers and the writers at the end of the thing. And Eugene Records going, look, baby, Don Von Tress. right in front of me. Remember that? I'm going, wow.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I wish you had got together with Dennis Lindy.
Man.
Wouldn't that have been something?
Goodbye, Earl. And
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
he wrote a bunch of great hits. Man, he was a lot like you. Yeah, same kind of different, cool.
Yeah, different angle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was
Well, it'd be something you never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
If you were looking for that.
Mm-hmm. So you ended up. You've worked off and on with Billy ever since. You know, written songs and done projects together and stuff. And
yeah, we did a record a few years ago, 2018, I think, and we did a 25-year Muscle Shoals version of it. And yeah, we stay in touch. He's. We're forever. Part of us is always going to be.
Sure.
Life changes, situations change.
Yeah.
But I've always kind of looked at him like my little brother, and I think he kind of thinks of me as family too.
Sure. So when you said you had a real hunch the night you wrote that song that it might be something. Have you had any more hunches like that on other things that have not happened, or do you still have?
No,
Maybe there'll be some record people listening. Yeah.
Oh yeah, several.
Is it published anywhere?
Yeah. No, that's
negotiable.
Yeah, there you go.
Way to go, baby.
Yeah. Well, thanks. But
Did you write Evergreen for our buddy Jeff Copley?
I did, in fact.
I love Evergreen.
Thank you. I've always loved that song.
See, there's one that got away to me. I've always thought that, that was shortly after Achy Breaky, you'd written that song. And again, it was one of those ones where that's really, they were paying a little more attention by that time, but even so, it didn't sound like everybody else. Yeah. So,
well, it was on a new artist.
Yep.
Yeah.
But even before we cut it, I'd pitched it around,
Yeah.
And, it's funny about you bring that song up. So, all this time goes by. We really started looking like we were going to have something happen with Jeff Copley, remember, on the Evergreen?
Yeah.
And that's when everything started falling apart. But, I've had more people over the years call me, and I've told you most of them. But our good friend Larry Shell, we all worked with, one time called me from Florida. It has to be not more than 10 years ago now, which would be 20 years after the fact. Called me, he said, as Larry would do, Russ Zavitson, you're not going to believe this. What? He said, I'm in the Walmart somewhere down in Florida. He said, and guess what's playing on the speakers here? And I said, what? He said, Evergreen, Jeff Copley. Wow. And I said, are you kidding me? And he said, no. And I've had other people call me and say they heard it here or heard it there and different things. Man, I thought that was what a great song. I thought it was perfect.
Thanks, man. Yeah, Jeff, you made a great record on that.
Yeah.
You and Jeff and who was your partner on that?
Donnie Canada, because he was managing the stuff.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, he came in and we worked on it together. Man, what another great song it should have been to me. Could have been, it's one of those ones.
Yeah, should have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you're only allowed. It's like heartbeats.
Yeah, maybe so.
You only get so
maybe
many.
So. You wrote another song that I always loved. There were several, but one of them I really loved. I thought was going to be another great big one. And I don't remember all the situation. You may remember, but you wrote a song called "Fall."
Yeah.
And
Fall,
Fall, F-A-L-L, and that I loved. And you wrote all those songs by yourself, right?
Yeah.
I think we talk about that some in here. And as I remember, but the Oak Ridge Boys fell in love with Fall, and they were still happening pretty big, and they went in and cut the song. And I don't remember what happened, but we thought it was going to be a big hit too. And I don't remember if they got dropped from the label or labeled something.
I've always, over the years, I've taken credit for starting Billy's career and ending theirs. I think that was our last record.
Was it really? Yeah.
With those guys, yeah. And, and love those guys. Are all good. I think they kind of missed an opportunity. Dwayne sang it they had a great young singer then who had replaced Bill Golden for a while. You remember his name?
Steve
Sanders.
Sanders. great singer, but and he would have nailed it, I think. But Dwayne sang it kind of in that gospel genre, and it maybe it wasn't as good as it could have been.
Well, the Oak Ridge Boys were going to cut Achy Breaky, so maybe they just didn't want to miss your next one.
Well, there might have been that, because I think they said on the record that they had Harold come down and pass his hands over the over the board before they started.
And I thought it was a good record, but honestly, and I'll say it here, I was never ever as happy with the records for the most part through most of my career as I was the demos. Most of the time, not always, but when the way you sang those songs and those demos to me was different than everybody there, of course, different than the way they record. And there was always something about, and with most real songwriters that could sing, their interpretation, the way they performed them was always, almost always better to me. So I'd hear the records and go, man, I wish that was Don singing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cyrus nailed it though, but
he killed, no doubt about it.
I think I heard though that it was pretty iffy there for a while, wasn't it? Vocal wise, that they there was some aspect of it that Jim and Joe decided he was not getting, and it so bugged them that they came really close to scrapping the song.
I can tell you this. My office was upstairs over the studio when they were doing those vocals, because they cut with Billy's band, as you know, which made it a little more difficult and harder to get it right. And when they got it, it was great. But they were having trouble, and I remember them calling me down there one day, and Billy they'd been singing all day, or part of it, I don't know, and I can't remember exactly, but they said, man, this is not the right melody. Does it sound right to you? And I said, He was singing the wrong melody. He was singing, I remember like it was yesterday, as I remember, he was singing, "You can tell the world you never was my girl." And I said, no, it's Mick Jagger. "You can tell the world you never," it's, that thing. And they were like, yeah. And so they got it later on that day, and I went down when I was leaving. They said, "Come hear this." And I went and heard it. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly right, and not that it depended on me. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that, but it had the attitude, and he got it right in the end, but they told me that's the only time of all the times they did it was one pass, as I remember, and he sang that.
Wow.
And I think it's that thing when, you go, you're just not getting this, walk away for a minute and come back, because Billy's a great singer. A really great singer. Yeah. And he just wasn't capturing the attitude, I guess. And they got it, though.
I think they sent him back to Shoney's, didn't they?
I don't remember, but yeah.
I think he took a break, came back and nailed it.
He killed it. Everything about it was right. Just everything,
It sounded, like Harold said, it was so different sounding back then. It was kind of like, to me, it was kind of like when we were coming out of that phase of music, pop music, and then all of a sudden you heard Dire Straits.
Right.
So you heard like a real guitar, drummers, and this was obviously, like I said, Billy's band.
Yeah.
They'd been playing it every night in the clubs, probably 4 or 5 times, because everybody insisted that they continue to play it. And so, it was just so different and kind of fresh, I guess, at that time.
One of my favorite stories about that was the week we did the demo. My ex-father-in-law was in town. He had, as we talked about, had that big club out in California, and he played 5 nights a week there. The week we demoed, he was out here visiting, and I brought it home and played the demo, and was excited about the song. He said, "Give me a copy of that," and I did. So he went back home and learned it with his band. And my father-in-law at that time would have been 55, 60. Playing this club out there, because he owned it. It was a big club, real big. And he called me about a week later, and in my great wisdom, I'm going to share this story with you. And so he said, we're playing this song, and he said, I got to play it 5 times a night. The song nobody's ever heard. They just get up and dance and love this song. He said, but you need to change the title of that song to Achy Breaky Heart. And I said, yeah, sure we do. You leave the publishing to me. Don't worry about it. You leave it to me. I know what I'm doing here. That's the first time anybody ever said that would be Achy Breaky Heart. So everything. Every time I tried to change a lick or, it was the wrong thing. Thank God hit me in the head and said, shut up,
Titles were never my strong point, I guess.
Man, what a good one. One of the other funny things you and I have never talked about, and you may remember this, But after that was a big hit, we were talking one day about something in the office, and we were talking about old fun songs. I don't know if it had been started with us talking about Achy Breaky and being different, and it's just a fun thing that nobody got. But you mentioned to me a song you always loved when you were much younger that was like, and you said it's sort of like Back in the Jungle. Meanwhile, Back in the Jungle. And I went, I love that song. You said you did. I said, you know what? It's like Nervous Narvis. Transfusion. You went, I love that song. And I said, now I know why we both understood. Yeah.
Transfusion.
You remember that? Yeah. I mean, it was Transfusion and Meanwhile Back in the Jungle and all those fun songs is what it was.
I smelled something cooking, and I looked to see. That's when I found out that it was a cooking me. It was like
I love that song.
Stranded in the jungle.
They're doing the Watus.
Man.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Isn't that funny? But how those things influence you think about that subconsciously and say, I just want to write something fun. It feels good, And it's like, I've heard you say, and we said we weren't going to talk about Achy Breaky all day, but again, it's like that primal thing. That's what you described it as one day, that I don't know where it came from or how it happened, but when it happens, it works every time. And it's not every day you can get that. And it was. It just.
Shoot.
Yeah, man. The day they got the vocals, the day they got the mix, saying, that's my single, that's it. I'm worried about those Marcy brothers. You need to call over there, and I've told that story. But, because Billy Ray couldn't say, that's my single. At that point, y'all hadn't even heard the finished record yet, it hadn't been turned in. So when they came in with that album and y'all were choosing the single, how did that happen with everybody? Who did you make that decision? Was it a group?
No, we knew that was going to be the single.
Okay, well, if you already knew, I didn't know, but he said, anyway, because it could have been that, that took some real big ones to pick that as a single, obviously.
Yeah. But it was different than anything else on the record.
Man. Yeah.
And we knew that Some Gave All had to come out somewhere because it was such a good song.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you have to wait to put out the next song after Achy Breaky?
We did it right away.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, singles were like 16 weeks back then, weren't they? Something like that?
Well,
I didn't know of Achy
that one
Breaky.
was probably longer.
Yeah.
Because
Still love Some Gave All.
Me too, man. What a great song. Billy's a great writer, man. He wrote some great songs.
Mm-hmm.
Were you there when he did it at the Wall and
Washington? Yeah, we went up for Memorial Day, and it was. Were you there, Russ?
I wasn't.
When they
it went to number one. Right?
Yeah, and there must have been 50 or 60,000 people there.
We were on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial.
Wow.
By the.
I've never seen that many people cry at one time.
Wow.
It was
crazy.
Well, Some Gave All, if you listen to it, is
that's a
an
great
incredible song, you know.
Yeah, man.
And Billy Ray sang it so good. Had emotion in it and had all the ingredients of a hit,
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Great times, wonderful times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, both of you guys.
Once in a lifetime times.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man, for sure. And then I remember shortly thereafter, the same story.
To be at the Music Mill back then when Toby was starting to hit, BR was hitting.
We talk about
there was
this all
so
the time.
much going on, and that place felt so. It was so full.
Well, there was
of
always
energy.
something being created there.
Absolutely.
That went on to really be something,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we, in a lot of, we talk about Harold kind of being this figure that was almost aloof. We always knew you were up there in that place, but at the same time, as big as you were to me, I was never intimidated by you.
Hope not.
When your presence was comforting and uplifting, what that magic thing that you have and had was just such a big part of that, man.
Absolutely, man. I couldn't agree more.
You guys, we had such a team of writers and producers and publishers and musicians.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
Yeah.
we could do anything you needed to do,
Yeah.
and always had state of the art equipment
Absolutely.
to do it on, and I'm sure that helped. And
Absolutely.
we had a lot of win-wins, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
So I think about it a good bit now, and how blessed we all are that not only did we have all that success, but we got each other
Yeah.
out
Amen.
of that deal too.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. You know, and I'm not saying that it doesn't happen
And
today.
like Paul is one of
Yeah.
one of them.
He's not on camera.
And
but-
Wade
Yep.
is you know,
Yep.
it would have been perfect for our organization.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like the story about where he went to the bank to make his first deposit check, where like you deposited like a check for $1.2 million.
Oh,
That
that
was Billy.
that was Cyrus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to his
Yeah,
house.
Billy Ray.
I went to his house one night on Sneed, and Billy's a big coffee guy. You know, drinking coffee all the time, and he brought this check out that had coffee stains all over it. Showed it to me. It was like $1 million.
That must have been the
$1.6
that was the
Yeah.
check. Yeah.
2 checks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, man, you know.
Anytime you get a check where it takes two of them,
Can you help me carry
It's too
this?
heavy. Too many zeros for that for that one.
Chuck Bedwell was in the car with him, and they went through the drive-through at the bank to deposit, and he said he wanted $20 cash back.
Oh man.
I can't validate that, but he was there.
I
so-
can't either.
Yeah.
I don't recall it, but
It sounds like something we would do in Eastern Kentucky.
Yeah.
could very well be.
Don, is there any crazy stuff that happened? Really crazy stuff you can tell? Anything fun before we stop that happened during that period of time?
Boy, there was so much stuff, and especially being on the road, crazy stories. I'm not, oddly enough, I'm not, as a writer, I'm not a very good storyteller. That's why it takes me, you know, like 5 weeks to write a paragraph, I guess, sometimes. But I would, one story that involved Harold and his ergonomic view of using the language. This was after I left the music mill, I guess, and I'd done my second little record. It was called what was it called? Straight and Narrow, and it was
Straight and narrow.
yeah, it wasn't my favorite songs, but
Good title.
Yeah, you remember, but Kenny Mims mixed and edited. It was a great sounding record, and so I went over to your office, and we were sitting up there, and I asked you if you'd listen to it, and so we did, and I think we probably had a cigarette, and you listened to the whole record. I mean, and none of that, you know, fast forward to the next one. I could tell, you know, you wasn't like you hated it or anything, but you you got done with the record, and there was a few moments of silence, and you looked up at me and said, "Don, you know, Nashville's really hard on music." And it was, and it was like that whistle on Wheel of Fortune, you know, you know, it was like, and I thought, man, thanks for being honest, Harold.
Different from the first 8 words he
Man,
told
I
you.
forgot about that.
You know, Nashville's really hard on music.
That's funny. That's funny. You
Yeah.
know what? You were talking about
They
having-
were tough on me.
well, you were telling that about whenever you got records, you had a few people you'd play it for because you knew they'd tell you the truth.
Yeah.
We all wanted that.
Yeah.
We all wanted that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good or bad. Yeah, that's funny. Nashville's hard on music. That's true. That's absolutely true.
Man.
Did I say that?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And you sincerely.
Well, that's funny.
Oh, man.
Well, what you think?
I'm good if you all are. Anything you need to pitch or plug, Don?
I have released some stuff, my work tapes under my band name, the Johnson Mill Branch Boys. I got 4 or 5 records out on that now. And it's, Harold, you'd get a kick out of them. They're just work tapes from home that we put through the process where it kind of homogenized.
Yeah, I gotta have that.
Yeah, check them out.
Yeah.
It's several uncuttable songs. Yeah, it's
Where can you
I
find
would
those?
expect nothing less.
they're on all the streaming points, Apple and YouTube and whatever.
Yeah, all of. I
All
went
of
and
them,
listened to
I
those
guess.
2 there night after you asked me to, and I tried to call you back.
Facebook and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're everywhere. Yeah,
Anywhere you can stream. But
Yeah.
the Johnson Mill Branch Boys.
there's some cool stuff on
It's
there.
my
Really
band.
is.
We all,
Little branch.
yeah, it's my band. We all live in the same house. We all sleep in the same bed.
Yep. They're little fellers.
Yeah, little tiny guys who won't come out of the holler.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah. But thank you, Harold Shedd.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you,
And
Don.
Russ.
Thank you, Harold.
And
Thank
Russ.
you, Wade.
It's
Wade.
been a great relationship.
Yeah,
Certainly
man.
has. I hope it lasts a long time
Yeah.
Me too.
more.
I hope it keeps going.
Me too.
Yep. All right.
We might do a repeat at any time. You never know.
That's
You never know where it's coming from or when it's coming, you know.
Yep.
it's part of the magic.
Yep. Amen. Thanks, you guys. This has been fun.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
right.
you. Thank
Thanks.
you, Wade and Russ.
Thanks, Harold. Thanks,
Paul,
Don.
thanks for visiting.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Behind the Shed. Special thanks to our guests today, Don Von Tress, Russ Zavitson, Wade Smith, and Harold Shedd. Behind the Shed podcast was created by Wade Smith, produced by Russ Zavitson and Wade Smith. Camera, audio, and video and editing by Zach Day and Jack Youngblood. Music written and composed by Russ Zavitson. You can contact the show via email at behindtheshed@gmail.com or visit us on Facebook and Instagram at Behind the Shed. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform and also on our YouTube page. If you would like to support this podcast, please visit patreon.com/behindtheshed. Have a great day and share some stories. Tune in next week as we go Behind the Shed. If you're in the market for a new or pre-owned vehicle, try Pop Chevrolet. Pop Chevrolet will get you the best price guaranteed. Visit popchevy.com. That's POPS Chevy.com. This episode is brought to you by Paintsville Tourism. Paintsville is located in eastern Kentucky in the heart of the US 23 Country Music Highway. Visit paintsvilletourism.com. That's paintsvilletourism.com. Come see why Paintsville is eastern Kentucky's city of note. This episode is brought to you by Wild Bill's Fireworks. At Wild Bill's, they will help you start and maintain a successful fireworks business. Whether you're starting a retail store, a seasonal tent, or a part-time venture, Wild Bill's is your one-stop wholesale fireworks supplier. Their team can help you pick inventory. They offer business training, ongoing support to make sure you stay profitable no matter the size of your business. Call or text for more information. Just ask for Bill at 606-367-5569. That's 606-367-5569. Or visit wildbillsfireworks.com and make sure you ask about their financing plan.